Unrestrained, reckless, and explosive Italian sports cars are great and all, but what if you channeled that passion for the common man? A car for the masses that turns heads, one that charts its own legend and leaves a legacy to be inherited by the entire automotive industry. A real game changer. I'm talking about the French. Yes, we know French cars are weird in ways that boggle the common brain, but in their bizarreness was a surprisingly modern and forward-thinking design philosophy that perpetuated into the cars that we drive today. Today, we're diving into the life of André Lefebvre. It's an unfamiliar name, but trust me, you know the cars he's built. From the Citroen Traction Avant to the DS, Lefebvre was pioneering mastermind behind the most modern cars of the 20th century, and a name we ought to remember. Lefebvre was born on August 19, 1894, just as some of the first motor cars began to rip down the paved roads of Paris. Fortunately for Lefebvre, his parents had a fair amount of disposable income, which went straight into their children's education. André, who showed keen interest in technical machines, was accepted at the Super Aero College, where he studied aeronautical engineering. His studies were rather useful to the French government, as when it went to war against Germany, André's expertise was called on to work at the Voisin airplane factory to build warplanes. And it was at this factory that André met his mentor and one who would lead him to the wonderful world of motor cars, Gabriel Voisin. Gabriel Voisin was an airplane pioneer. In 1905, he and his brother Charles founded the airplane Voisin and built the first ever powered aircraft in 1907. They also launched the first ever airplane to be built with steel tubing, making it far more durable than their competitors and were well suited to the needs of the French War Ministry. His successes didn't go unnoticed, and a wealthy businessman approached Voisin in 1917 to buy up his factory for an immense fortune. Voisin accepted the money, with which he founded the laboratory, which was in essence a playground for Voisin to develop and test his wild ideas. And it was here where Lefebvre became the lead engineer of a team of 8 mechanics. It was the beginning of the partnership that would result in some of the most stunning cars ever built. Voisin's laboratory miraculously survived the war untouched, but the end of the war also meant an end to his warplane business. It was time to change their sales strategy. The solution? Automobiles. Voisin was approached by one Ernest Artaud, who came with a blueprint for a 4-cylinder engine luxury motor car. Apparently, the plans were first proposed to André Citroen, who rejected it due to his preference for affordable, mass-produced cars. But Voisin welcomed the opportunity to buy out the carefully drawn-out plans, as Voisin had no technical background in building cars. And there's a fun little anecdote about the first chassis and their maiden test run from Voisin. The mechanics had mistakenly assembled the rear axle the wrong way around, making the car move in reverse. Voisin decided to continue the test with this reverse chassis and discovered that the car was more stable under braking. Essentially, even though the cars only had brakes installed on the rear wheels, as it was customary back then, because the car was moving in reverse, it was as if the brakes were on the front wheels. Voisin discovered that the car had more stable braking with brakes in the front wheels, which led to him fitting brakes on all 4 wheels from then on, first of many innovations to come. The Voisin C1 was their first car, producing 100 brake horsepower. The car was not only fast, but also reliable, establishing Voisin as a major luxury car manufacturer. But the original blueprints by Artaud and Dufresne had ample room for improvement, which Voisin and Lefebvre acted on. Voisin's intuition and Lefebvre's technical prowess came together to realize Voisin's unique design philosophy. You see, back then, most automobile manufacturers came from an engine design point of view. But Voisin and Lefebvre, both of whom came from airplane manufacturing, had a unique preference for chassis and body design. Voisin in particular had placed tremendous focus on controllability of a car, rather than outright power output of an engine. He was a vocal proponent of lower center of gravity. Now, this is quite a common theory amongst car manufacturers these days, but it was a radical principle back then. And this was not just about performance. Controllability was directly connected to the safety of the car, which in those days was practically non-existent. And such principles were shared by Lefebvre. In the early 1920s, Lefebvre began working on competition cars for Voisin's experimental department, and here, combined with engine design expertise of Marius Bernard, developed some of the most successful racing cars in early French motorsports history. The Voisin C3S in particular showed its racing prowess at the 1922 Grand Prix at Strasbourg, where the cars came in 1, 2, and 3. Oh, and that weird bulge on the side of the car? That was to fulfill the minimum width regulations set by the ACF. Cheeky, but effective. The unhappy ACF regulator slapped specific dimension requirements for the 1923 season, which essentially robbed Voisin of their development work they had done so far. With limited time, Lefebvre was tasked with creating a race car in just half a year to compete at the French Grand Prix. With a power disadvantage, Lefebvre had to claw back the performance in the chassis department. The result? The stunning Voisin C6. The car looked nothing like anything else on the grid. With an aluminum and wood monocoque chassis and a physical propeller in the front powering the water pump, it really did look like an airplane without wings. The car weighed in at just 660 kilograms, but despite its shape that looked as though it could take off, their sleeve valve engine generated nowhere near enough power to prove competitive. Out of the 4 C6s that André and his team built for the race, only one finished, and finished last. For the subsequent season, Voisin turned to touring car races. And although André and his team churned out race cars like a well-oiled car printing machine, they failed to make notable impressions. Voisin withdrew from competitive racing and instead turned his attention to record setting. And records they set. Lefebvre, as the team manager, was tasked with designing and building the record setters. By 1927, the coveted international 24-hour record was set, covering 4,383 kilometers with an average speed of 182 kilometers an hour. The string of successful record attempts by Voisin also translated to sales. The Voisin road cars were some of the most coveted luxury cars in France in the 20s, driven by wealthy industrialists and businessmen, politicians including the President of France and the famous architect Le Corbusier. Despite this, Voisin was in financial troubles. The low production numbers didn't help, but the primary culprit was probably the endless record-setting attempts Voisin was entrenched in. In 1929, Voisin instructed Lefebvre to construct yet another record-setting car, this time using a petrol-benzol mixture as requested by Yako, Voisin's sponsor for the record attempt. The 1929 record car housed a V12 with an estimated power output of 250 brake horsepower. While it set out for a 40,000-kilometer run, its wheel collapsed at around 32,000 kilometers, ending the run prematurely. While the driver escaped serious injury, the run was over. The following year, with the Wall Street crash looming over Voisin's factory, they headed up on yet another record attempt, this time for a 50,000-kilometer run. And they succeeded with a 4.8-liter V12 C18 chassis. But even this could not save Voisin from its financial debt. Forcing Voisin to accept a merger with a Belgian consortium, Lefebvre was advised to look for other job opportunities. And soon, Lefebvre found himself in the employ of Louis Renault. Lefebvre's initial mission involved the Reina Stella, but Lefebvre was not interested in working with bulky rear-wheel drive cars. No, his interest had been stolen by the up-and-coming front-wheel drive prototypes, which were lighter, more economical, and most importantly, new. And when Lefebvre brought up this novel, if not untested idea to Renault, the Emperor of Billancourt just fired him. Lefebvre was out of a job, but not for long. Voisin had been contacted by a man named André Citroen of Citroen, who shared his plans for a revolutionary front-wheel drive car, but complained that his team was not cut for the job. Well, fortunately for him, the perfect man just happened to be fired by Renault. And by this time, the Great Depression had traveled across the Atlantic. All the expensive investments Citroën had put into modernizing his factories and his generous spending habits was about to bankrupt the company, unless they began producing a car so outstanding that nothing would dare compete. A front-wheel drive car. Thankfully, Lefebvre was all about front-wheel drive cars. Armed with years of knowledge in building monocoque chassis, Lefebvre was perfectly suited to lead Citroën into the new age of affordable, closed-body front-wheel drive saloons. The father of the modern-day car. The only catch? Lefebvre and his team only had 18 months to build it. Except the team finished it in just 13 months. And it was revealed to the public in April of 1934 as the 7CV Traction Avant, and it was revolutionary. Front-wheel drive design brought a multitude of innovations. Without the need of a drive shaft, the car rode lower, so much so that for the first time, people were able to get in a car without the need of a running board. It had a monocoque chassis with stamped steel body, a flat floor, and smooth roof that made the car very aerodynamic. But the early versions were hideously unreliable. And while neither front-wheel drive cars nor monocoque chassis were new, neither had been mass-produced to this scale before. With the costs of refining and developing new tools for the job compounding, the company was in a dire financial situation. And so as a last resort, Citroën turned to Michelin. Yep, that Michelin. With Michelin came their quality control system, which saved Lefebvre's creation. The now reliable Traction Avant began proving its worth. Over the course of its long 23-year life, there were over 750,000 units produced, a staggering number at the time. But the company continued to struggle, largely from lack of organized structure and productivity, and Michelin wanted to change that. When André Citroën died in July 1935, the Michelins made their move, becoming the majority shareholder of Citroën, and the cost-cutting measures began. Between 1934 and 1936, the workforce was reduced from 24,000 to just 11,500, and those that remained had to settle for lower salaries. All the unnecessary business activities beyond automobile manufacturing were shut down, including this wild advertising stunt Citroën paid for to have his name lit up on the Eiffel Tower. Under Pierre Michelin's leadership, Lefebvre was instructed to build a van. The decision was well informed by a thorough market research conducted by Michelin's sprawling network of sellers across France. The result was the TUB. Doesn't look too impressive, but it was the first ever van to have a lateral sliding door, something that almost every van on the streets today has. Then in 1937, tragedy struck. The president of Citroën, Pierre Michelin, was killed in a car accident driving his Traction Avant. Replacing him was Pierre-Jules Boulanger, who was the vice president of Citroën at the time. Despite the sudden change, Boulanger wasted no time in pushing Citroën to new heights. He wanted Citroën to build the car of the people. Looks didn't matter as long as it could carry a family and their luggage at a reasonable speed. Just make it happen. Lefebvre headed the TPV project, a very small car that would eventually become the basis of the 2CV. The prototype underwent intense testing, and after 47 prototypes, the car was ready. Satisfied, Boulanger planned to reveal the Citroën TPV at the 1939 Paris Auto Show. But it was cancelled because, Lefebvre spent most of his time essentially imprisoned in Paris under Nazi occupation. His expertise in automobile manufacturing and his critical role at Citroën saved him from being sent to a labor camp. But his daytime work was limited to making motorized plowshares and bicycles, a far cry from the days of endless innovation. Lefebvre's suffering was compounded when his wife Claire was diagnosed with a kidney disease. Perhaps to distract Lefebvre from his bottomless depression, Boulanger instructed him to build the successor to the TUB. The H concept was developed in complete secrecy, with the object of overcoming the critical downsides of the TUB, which was known for being underpowered and expensive. The most outstanding characteristic of the H concept is, I'm sure you've guessed it, the body. In order to save costs, the panels were kept straight with curvatures only on the necessary joints. The corrugated look was a choice made out of necessity, which provided greater strength with thinner sheets. Pierre Franchisset, the man behind the corrugated body design, apparently pointed to the aircraft design at the time that utilized corrugated sheet metals for the same purpose as a source of inspiration. Lefebvre no doubt supported this design, as he himself came from an aeronautical background. As Lefebvre busied himself at Citroen, the tide was turning on World War II. Victorious General de Gaulle marched into Paris in 1944, declaring the liberation of the city. Back in action, Lefebvre began revamping the TPV for the post-war market. It still retained the steel body of the pre-war TPV, but it now had 2 headlights, an air-cooled engine, and a brand new horizontal coil spring suspension and dampers. The new 2CV was revealed in October 1948 at the Paris Auto Show, and guess what? It became a cult car. Over 7.2 million units were produced over its long 41-year life. And time came for the Traction Avant to be replaced. Boulanger gave the green light to Lefebvre in designing and developing its successor. But then in 1950, November 11th, Boulanger died in a car accident, once again like his predecessor, driving a Traction Avant. Citroën was soon taken over by Robert Puiseux, the heir to the Michelin business. And the one bright side was that Puiseux was a great fan of Lefebvre and his work and gave him a blank check to get on with replacing the Traction Avant. The result was the Citroen DS. Bertoni, the master sculptor and designer of Citroën, was once again given the reins to design the brand new DS. The iconic silhouette of the DS was a result of Bertoni's intuitive knowledge around aerodynamics and Lefebvre's boundary-pushing design philosophy. The interior, too, was just as futuristic, Lefebvre implementing new synthetic materials and a first-ever molded dashboard. The chassis was surprisingly no longer monocoque, but the steel frame provided enough strength for Lefebvre to experiment with plastic body panels that could be easily detached. This kept the car light, cheap to manufacture, and easy to repair. You probably wouldn't want to be in one in a crash though, as the pillars and the roof were, let's say, not built to the standards we demand from cars today. It was far more important, in Lefebvre's eyes, to ensure the car was light and easy to control. The DS sported disc brakes, solving the overheating problem with the traditional drum brakes. And like the Voisin laboratory racer Lefebvre had designed in 1923, the DS once again had a shorter rear track, allowing for a more aerodynamic teardrop-like body shape. The front-heavy front-wheel drive DS displayed excellent stability, with 65% of the weight on the front wheels. In fact, the rear load was so light that the car was able to drive on a single rear wheel only. The most famous feature, however, was its suspension. The hydro-pneumatic system first developed by Paul Mage not only powered the butter-smooth suspension system, it also powered the steering, clutch, gear changes, brakes, and the brake distribution device. And in 1955, the DS19 debuted at the Paris Auto Show, with the journalists declaring the car as La Déesse, the goddess. It was so popular that by the end of the show, Citroën received over 12,000 orders the same day, produced 98,068 units in its first year of production, and ended up selling over 1.3 million units during its lifetime. The DS was revolutionary, but Lefebvre wasn't going to dust off his hands and relax in his past glory. Instead, he was going to go full revolution mode. With this, the C concept. Also known as coccinelle, or literally raindrop, André pushed the boundaries of Citroën's executives' patience. The car underwent several prototypes with a serious attempt at mass-producing this ground-roaming saucer. But it never came to be. In July 1958, Lefebvre became ill with hemiplegia, with the right side of his body becoming paralyzed. The C concept was quickly discarded and was replaced with the Ami 6, which was really popular in France. Lefebvre died on May 4, 1964. He lived a life of a true pioneer. unorthodoxy defining his career and legacy. While many could claim themselves to be unorthodox, not many could claim to have influenced millions of people with their unconventional designs. And with Lefebvre's traction avant, the 2CV, and the DS, he most certainly deserves to be called the greatest pioneer of all time. Thank you for watching this video. Apparently, unlike the Italians, the French were rather reserved about boasting their achievements. I mean, André Citroen did literally have his name lit up on the Eiffel Tower, but I guess he's one of the quirky ones. Lefebvre was one of those people who never wrote a memoir or commissioned a biography. Despite that, because his work was aimed at the masses and his cars were produced globally in the millions of units, there were ample amount of things to talk about. For those who are interested in diving deeper into Lefebvre's life, I highly recommend this book, where I found most of the information for this video. It's a short read and an excellent overview of his life and his accomplishments. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.